Welcome to the video. Today on our Titan Leader Talk, we have Coach Kenny Simpson from Southside High School. You can find him on Twitter or access him through his website. Coach, thanks for being here.
Oh, I appreciate you having me.
And then on this next slide here, one of the things that you've gained some notoriety for is your book, Find a Way. I know I've read it a couple times, very easy read, and very informative. I wish I had found it when I first got my head coaching job instead of after the fact, but it's a great resource. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to do a book giveaway. So anyone that watches this video, if you guys tweet at us and then also at Coach Simpson and include those hashtags, we're going to do a drawing and, give a free copy of that book out there. So, Coach, what inspired you to write this book?
I actually started writing that book probably maybe 7 or 8 years ago when I took the job here at Southside. I had left Montgomery and had some success in Montgomery, Alabama. And so about 31 years old, I kind of thought I knew a lot of the right answers to some things that were going well for me. And then I got to a job that was a big challenge and learned I did not know it. And so I kind of put the book away for a couple of years and really focused on getting better. And then it completely changed. I was writing a book on the mindset of here's what you should do as a head coach. And now it's more of me looking back of here's things that I did that didn't work and some things that I did that did work. And this is just advice, an old coach talking to you young guys or guys that are in coaching of some stuff that I've had to learn the hard way. I got a job at 27 in 4A football in Alabama, which is pretty good level of football. And I kind of got fed to the wolves and had to learn a lot of things. And so I wrote the book pretty much like I could go back, you mentioned it, and talk to my younger self and tell myself, hey, here's some things I wish you had known, and so that's kind of the mindset of the book is I'm not a perfect coach, but I've lived long enough to maybe give some advice to some guys that are getting in this profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone thinking about picking it up, I'll tell you, it's as a coach that's only been a head coach for a couple seasons now, it's something you can really relate to. I know there's a lot of resources out there, but when you pick up those books by some of these big name college coaches, they have a whole different level of expectations and resources and stuff like that. And, so I found your resource to be, amazing. So I really appreciate you putting that out there, Coach.
Thank you. And I think you mentioned it, my goal has always been, and anything I do is to make things simple and make things clear to people. I think, like you mentioned, there's a lot of resources out there where people are really smart. And after I read them, I feel dumber. And that was not the goal of this book. This book, the goal was, hey, look, I'm going to talk to you like you would talk to a coach in a field house. That's kind of was the mindset of it.
Yeah. All right. So on this next slide here, we talk about, you mentioned where you had coached, and I put a couple things up there. Probably the biggest thing that, kind of attracted me to your story was the idea that, at Southside and Alabama Christian Academy, you took programs that were struggling. One was not that far removed from a 20-game losing streak, only won a handful of games in 5 seasons, and you kind of turned them around. You've done that twice now. And we actually got a lot of people out there that I think can relate to that. So what do you think was your biggest challenge when you stepped into those jobs and you're looking at their past and where you want to go?
It can be overused a lot, but I really do believe that changing the mindset of athletes is sometimes one of the most overlooked things by young coaches. Getting kids to buy into what you're trying to do and simply to play hard. When I went into both these situations, we were very honest with the kids, and it's not a magic pill. It's going to take really hard work and work that you don't even know how hard you can go. And so the first thing we tried to do at both places was just get the kids to believe in what we were doing, let them know that, hey, we believe in you, and build confidence. A lot of times you're going in these situations, one thing goes bad, and that's what they expect. And so they just fall apart. And so you have to build these kids up to the point where they're willing to try. What's amazed me at both these situations is when you go into a situation like this, you can guarantee those kids are hungry for success. They're hungry. And it's been really fun for me to be around kids, to watch how much work they've put in and to see it finally pay off. If you've never experienced this as a coach, it's one of the more awesome things is to watch kids break a big losing streak or to do something for the first time. And it really attracts me to those kind of programs.
Yeah. And, you look at some of these programs out there, like the elite ones, they always talk about compete, and there has to be a winner and a loser, right? And that's great. So you mentioned changing the mindset. So how do you take kids that had always been the loser, or that was like their normal, and like what are some specific things you did or you sold them on to switch from being that loser to that winner?
Well, I'll speak mainly to Southside because that's the most recent one. The big thing for us is we really have never talked about the scoreboard ever. We just don't talk about it. Even recently, and we've won a few conference championships. We've not talked about that being our end goal. Our end goal is simply to be the best that we could be in that moment and every day that we're working through it. And so when you get kids to recognize that the work they're putting in now does matter, and I think that goes both ways, for the kids to put the work in and for the coaches to make sure you're using that time for the most, you're not wasting these kids' time. You're putting in things that are going to help them be successful. The other thing I think that really has helped, I get asked a lot, and I'm sure you may as well, about buy-in. How do you get kids to buy in or buy this? And what I tell people is you better have something worth buying. And if that's only winning and losing, man, you're missing the boat. We're coaching high school young men and trying to teach them all these different life lessons. And that's what we focus on. And then really what happens is the byproduct of that is they become successful people, and success can be on the field and of course off the field as well. So I know that's something a lot of young coaches, when I first heard it, I would kind of tune that out. I'm like, I want some scheme stuff. I want to know how to win X's and O's, and that stuff's important too. It's part of your job. But the reality is these kids need to understand that what you have is more than just one night a week. It's something that can help them all the way the rest of their life.
Yeah, that process-driven mindset, or growth mindset, it's got all kinds of catchy titles. It's amazing. Whoever we talk to on here that has found success, that's what they talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to hear a high school coach say that, along with some of the people leading the top programs in the country here. On this next slide here, one of the things that is in your book, you do a great job with, and then you even just released a YouTube video kind of talking about this. So I'll let you take this over. Kind of talk about these 3 Ds of leadership.
Yeah, this is kind of a funny story, and I mentioned it in that YouTube, but my father is a retired military, for Air Force, was a colonel, and so he would always say, this is how leadership is in the military, and he would say this as kind of a joke, make a decision, give it to somebody, and leave. And I've thought about that for a while, and when I was writing the book, I went, that really is the areas that I needed to grow the most in, from a young coach to a coach now that has dealt with staff. Because when I was given the job, I understood hard work. I understood working with kids. I had no idea how to work with assistant coaches. I had no idea. I just assumed that everyone was like me. And so what happened a lot of times was I would make decisions and not listen to anybody, okay, because I didn't want somebody to disagree with me. I didn't want to be challenged, and so the first D on there is to decide. As a coach, you need to hear everyone in the room. But the hard part of doing that is when you get overwhelmed by a lot of different opinions, you have to make a decision and you got to ride with it. And so in our coaching staff now, I encourage heavily on the weekend and the off season, we'll meet, we'll shut the doors, and don't talk to me like I'm your boss. Talk to me like we're in this together. Tell me what I need to know, and we're going to go through, and then we're going to pick the best decision. And obviously, we do this, but it falls to me. I have to make a decision of what I think is best, and that rarely is my original decision. I've got 7 coaches around me that are great people, and all of them have different strengths. So that kind of leads into the second D, is when you delegate work out. When I was young, I thought delegate meant like put work on people I don't want to do, like, mow the field. That goes to you, stuff that I didn't want to do. The real part of delegation I've found is you've got to understand the strengths of the people around you. Like, you got to know which guys around you are better at certain things. Some of that's obvious, some of that's not as obvious. Then you got to teach them. That takes longer than just doing it yourself. So what we usually default to, or I defaulted to as a coach, is I would just do it myself, because it would just get done the way I wanted it to get done. I didn't have to mess with anything. And the problem with that is that's not sustainable. You're going to wear yourself out doing that. You're going to make people that are on your staff not envious, but upset with you because you're not using them. So delegating is finding out the strengths of everybody around you, okay, and then allowing them to shine as part of what you're doing. This is a group effort. We're going to shine together, but all under the same umbrella. So when you say delegate, teach them the way you want it to be done, help them through it, but allow one of your people on your staff or working underneath you to excel. And then the last one is depart. Let them be the person that does that. Let them have unique ideas. It needs to function as a unit all together. But the reason I've got guys on my staff is because they bring something to the table. And so allow them to do that. And what's cool with this is we've started to use this with our players. And so I'll identify, we don't do a council. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of coaches do those official. I don't like official things because I feel like that ties you down. So we try to work this one-on-one with our leaders on our team. You can identify who they are. You can do whatever you want to. Some teams vote on it. Some coaches pick it. I do it one-on-one. So I'll pull in what we call the alphas, or the leaders on the team. And that's a term I made up. We don't call them that in front of everybody else. But basically, these are the guys who they're the leaders. And I start working with them on this stuff. Figure out what their strength is. Where can they help our team? And when you do that, you mentioned creating buy-in. Of course they're going to buy in. You're allowing them to grow as a person underneath the umbrella of, hey, I'll help you. Let's do this together. And so that to me has been probably the number one thing. I've still got a long way to go. You can ask my assistants here. I still like to jump in and do things, but that's been the best thing for me because it's allowed me not to face that burnout. And I talked to a lot of coaches where you could have 9 guys on the staff, but if you don't do this, you're really a staff of 1. We want it to be use everybody's strengths, and my goal has always been to let them do it if they're great at it, and then I can put my time somewhere else.
So Coach, you mentioned this, and I think every head coach struggles with this, is that, kind of the buck stops with you, right? So many times you delegate something to another coach and you're like, I wouldn't have done it quite like that, right? So for you, what was the hardest thing, like that hardest role for you to take and delegate out to someone?
Ooh, the hardest role, anything that deals with game plan stuff on a Friday night is really hard for me to give up. And so generally the way that works is I sit in a room and I have an older coach on the staff that has been great to me. And he knows to kind of be my guy that looks at me and says, Coach, but I sit in the room and I let these guys come through it. Let them work through the process like I did. The reality is, like you mentioned, I'm not going to let us do something that's going to hurt us. So at some point, if I have to step in, I will. But a lot of times you got to let them work through the process. So some of the things we've done to set that up is we have B team games. So like we've got a JV game or we've got this game. And you got to let those guys make those mistakes in those games as coaches so they learn it. Like I learned it. Like, hey, we got to have time management. We got to understand down and distance. We got to learn all that stuff. Well, the only way you really do that is in a game. And so you've got to let them kind of have those opportunities where you step back, let them fail, then let them come to you and have those conversations and work through it. Because, not everybody learns just by being told. Most of us learn by experience. But I can't allow that to happen on a Friday night because, they tend to fire people if they don't win too many games on Friday. You know how that goes. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then going back to the thing where you said you call in your alphas or your team leaders. So what are some of the things that you bring those kids in to delegate to them? Like, give us some specifics.
Sure. Well, the first thing we do is I'm blessed enough that I'm on all the campuses. So like our campus is at K through 12. Now we've got a ton of kids, and obviously I'm not heavily involved in the young ones, but as they get to about the 7th grade, I don't do much with them. I let our younger coaches coach them, but I'm around and you can see, I mean, every coach can pretty much point the finger and go, that one and that one and that one run the show. I mean, if no one was in here, you can figure out who those guys are. So we try to identify them as young as possible. And then as they work up from 7th, 8th, 9th grade, all I'm doing at that age is trying to form a pretty good relationship with these kids. Fortunately for me, I've got junior high coaches that handle a lot of stuff. So I just want them to know who I am. And those ones I really want to get to know because I know those ones are going to influence other people. Then as they get into 10th grade, they kind of fall under me now. Now they're all under me, but in 10th grade, those are my kids. At that point, we start calling those kids and having the discussions of, you know, you are a leader. And so the expectation level for you is higher than everybody else because people follow you. Fair or not, that's part of reality, just like with me. And so we'll start working out what are they good at, what are they not so good at. And those are the ones you've got to get on your side. They have to believe in your vision. And there are also ones that are going to be harder to coach because those are alphas. Those are not kids that are just going to take what you say and just do it. These are the kids I'm talking about that want to question everything. So they need to see some of the inner workings of why we do this so they can really believe in what we're doing. And then you say, all right, you know what? I'm going to probably use you as some examples if you're okay with that. You're okay with me using, yeah, coach, of course, that's fine. So, because at this point you've built a relationship. So now you can be a little bit tougher on those kids. And then you also a lot of times will say, hey, I tell you what, there's 2 or 3 kids here that really I could use some help with. And now you're giving them a little bit of, you know what, coach, yeah, I'll talk to them, coach. I got you. You know, and they'll go handle some things that can be handled that won't get all the way to me. Something along the lines of small, you know, hey, so-and-so has not been, you know, being at practice on, or whatever it is, being on time, or we're giving them a great effort or whatever. If it's a big issue, I'm going to handle it, not a kid, but small issue. You're going to, hey, I could use some help with that. You think you could help with that? And a lot of times they will. Or, hey, you know, I went through the locker room and noticed it wasn't exactly to the standard we want it to be at. Would you mind kind of helping me out with that? And when those kids recognize that you see that they are a leader and you're empowering them, they're going to do that. Now you have to teach them. They don't go in there and just yell at everybody. You got to kind of teach them how to be a leader because these are the naturally born ones. So those are the ones you want to teach. So it becomes a good relationship forward and back. It's been funny because these kids look different. Like they're not all the same. And so a lot of times these kids and I come from different worlds. But when they recognize that I see, hey, you are a leader and I'm going to help you become a better leader, they're going to believe in you and then do whatever you ask them to do because they know you care for them.
Awesome. All right. So on this next slide, and this was, you know, a whole chapter in your book, your coaching staff. And in your book, you mentioned, you know, when you took over, you kind of inherited the coaching staff and, you know, it was mainly in place there. And, you know, you talked about, you know, loyalty, right? That's one of your biggest fears. You talked about in that first year, you really tested their commitment. You want guys that are really passionate, then you do evaluation. So one of the biggest things we get is how do you develop your staff? How do you pick your staff? So maybe you could walk us through exactly how these things all come into play.
Yeah, that was probably to me the biggest thing on a young coach is learning how to deal with their staff, and that's huge. And so, and I did a horrendous job at my first head coaching job with this, because here's the deal: is a fine line you have to walk. You know, it's your show, and you can be the big shot and do whatever you want to do. But my goal is to develop these coaches so that they can help me, and that I can help them. And so as I've gone throughout my career, I've now had several that have moved on to become head coaches. That's been an awesome thing. It's been really cool to watch. So they've got to understand, just like your players do, that I do care for your personal dreams and goals. You know, where do you want to be? You know, and that was hard for me because I just assumed every coach wanted to be a head coach. But that's not the truth. You work in high school football long enough, not very many want to. Some of them just like being around the kids and they want to help and they just enjoy football. And so you got to kind of see which ones want to be a head coach, and those ones I give more to. All right, you want to be a head coach down the road. Let me show you a couple things you need to see. Here's some more of this. And so you find out real quickly, they find out real quickly, that's what they want to do. So I think you do need to see where they are as far as you mentioned there, their commitment, their passion, where they want to be. It's not that I can't work with somebody that is not as passionate as me, because I better be the most. I'm the head coach. I better be the most passionate. So you need to figure out which coaches want that. You do have to be, you have a certain level of commitment we expect from everybody. But then there are some coaches that want to be a head coach or a coordinator. They want to move up in this world. And those are the ones that we're going to give more to. And you mentioned loyalty on there. And loyalty to me obviously is huge, because you can't have a guy that's a cancer to you. But loyalty to us is loyalty to the school. And so I think a lot of times we use the word loyalty and we think it means like loyal to me. I want you to be loyal to our program. And if that means you and I have to go behind a closed door and you have to tell me that there's some things you think I need to work on, you know what? Then that's what we need to do, because that's loyal. We're being loyal to our program. What it doesn't mean is you're going and telling the board or our boss, you got a problem with me. You know, if you want to come talk to me, man, let's shut the door and I'll listen, you know, but it doesn't mean you can go somewhere else. Like, I'm not going to go over your head and go, before I talk to you, for, you know, and that's what loyalty to me means, loyalty to our program. And then we talked about, you know, test and commitment. The main thing to me is this: when you inherit coaches, I don't know what situation they're moving into. You know, I was very fortunate with the one I moved into. I had some pretty good ones. But what I've learned is if you've set the expectation level here, then guys will either get on board or they'll find another job. I mean, that's just, you don't have to be an ugly process. You don't have to be, it just kind of happens. Here's where our effort level is going to be. And if that's not where you want to be, usually you'll be able to weed those guys out, or they'll weed themselves out, actually. And so that's kind of where you work through. And so this is a tough situation, because I don't go into a job saying I want to get rid of that guy and that. I don't know. You know, but I go in and saying, here's where our level is. If you're willing to rise to this, that's awesome. And if not, then, you know, maybe somewhere else is where you need to move.
That last one, the idea of evaluating, in your book, you talk about like an end of season evaluation. What does that look like?
And there's a lot of good resources out there. And so I don't want to just speak to just one of them, but basically that's going to be on paper, going through the different levels that I expect from you. So your professionalism, okay, your ability with X and O's, how you work with kids. You know, we're going to go through each of those different categories. So here's where I think we are right now, and here's some things we did well. Here's some things we could probably improve, and then here's some things that I think you have a natural skill for. So to me, I was always taught you kind of do the sandwich method when you're going to give news. You good, then the meat is usually where we got to improve, and then good at the end, because these are guys you want to help improve. And I think most coaches are willing to listen to you when they recognize you're doing this to help them. You know, you're doing this to help them, and then I do a self-evaluation. And I will ask for feedback at times from my coaches. Not all of them, but some of them I'll ask for feedback of where are some areas I need to improve. Where did I not help you? So that's going to be on that sheet somewhere, is where can I help you? You know, where do you want to go? And so, because the evaluation is going to be different. You know, if it's a guy who's comfortable being I've got a guy on my staff right now, one of my favorite guys has been around. He's a wide receiver coach, special teams coordinator. That's what he wants to do. He doesn't really want to move up. Okay. Then I've got 2 or 3 young guys on my staff that may be a head coach down the road. Well, that evaluation is going to look way different. You know, it's going to look way different, because those guys want to move up here, and he's comfortable where he is and he's doing a good job for me. That might be a 5-minute conversation. The young guy who's 25 who wants to be a head coach and then maybe a coordinator, that might be an hour and a half. You know, we may be in there for a while going through stuff. So it just depends on the level of where they want to go, you know, and what you need them to do.
All right, on this next slide, you know, this week through Titan, we're kind of talking about different ways we're addressing the current situation. We've all been thrown for a loop here. You know, Titan tries to provide a lot of free leadership / culture resources.
Yeah, good stuff.
So, you know, maybe talk us through how you guys at Southside are handling the mental, the physical, and the football piece.
Yeah, man, this is the number one question most coaches have, and You know, for us, we're still learning as we go, just like everybody else is. And so, first thing that we're going to ask for is this, and it kind of goes back to everything we've been talking about. We want to make it as individual as possible. So we're going to do a program, and I'll go through some of the things we do for all our kids. But I want each one of our kids getting a call or a text from a coach, and I've tried to call each one of them myself and text them. But I want each of our assistants we've kind of given certain kids to be individual, because you know, they're going to open up to a guy one-on-one a lot more than anything else. Okay. Second thing we want to make sure is these kids understand that we're doing this for their own good. And if they don't lift weights or do football stuff, you know, that is what it is. But I want to make sure that you have food. You know, a lot of our kids are in a poor area, you know, that you have the necessities that you need. So that's the first thing we're going to take care of. We're going to make sure that stuff you mentioned on here, mental, physical, football, all of that is awesome. You got to get that emotional and all that stuff set first. Are you safe at home? You know, do you have food at home? Do you have all of these things? Are these working out? Okay. Now, once we've had that conversation a couple times, now we're going to bring up some other stuff. So how is our schoolwork? Okay. Where are we doing on that? And so going through the mental part of that stuff. We do a lot of the same things that probably a lot of coaches do as far as the football physical part is. So we'll try to do a Zoom meeting with position groups. So we just rotate them each week. So I think this week will be our offensive lineman. So that way, but inside that meeting is the same thing. We may talk football for 15, 20 minutes. But we're going to talk other stuff for 30 minutes. You know, how are we doing? How's this going? How's schoolwork? Have you checked in on so-and-so? What are you hearing about? You know, we want to make sure these kids understand we care for them more than just football. Our strength coach is probably one of the best in the business, I think. Derek Smith, he's on Twitter. Probably a lot of guys follow him. And so he sends out a workout every day. We're trying to encourage our kids to video themselves and send it back to us. And so we do that type of stuff as well, like a lot of people are doing. We've been doing a kind of a man's 101 or a dad 101 or just a grown-up 101, whatever you want to call it. Where basically we sat in a Zoom as a coaching staff and realized, like right now, I've got a 12-year-old boy. And so we're doing a lot of things like teaching him how to build a fire and how to address an envelope. But a lot of our kids we have don't have that. So, well, this is a great time. Let's video ourselves doing stuff. So one of my guys videoed himself using a chainsaw. I'm teaching kids how to do that and then send it out. And it's not just a football. We send it to the whole school. One of our guys did gutting a fish. You know, here's how you handle that. If you're going to go fishing, here's what you do. I did addressing an envelope. One of our coaches' wives did how to check air pressure and fill up your tire. My wife did how to iron a shirt. You know, so we're trying to go through the things that we always say we don't have time to do during the season. Well, we got time now. You know, so what you're doing with your own kid and your own family, let's do with all these kids. So I think that's kind of unique and different. I think it's something the kids might get from. They may not watch it at all, but maybe something they care to do. Football wise, and I tell you what, Division III coaches and guys that have coached a long time ago, if I get my kids in August, we'll get them ready. You know, we'll get them ready. And so I think a lot of coaches are worried about, you know, having all this time with the kids and what are we going to do? You know, what we're going to do, we're going to live, and we're going to adapt. We're going to make sure our kids are safe. Football is going to happen or it's not, and there's nothing I can do about it. So let's just make sure our kids are taken care of. And when it comes to that point, we'll figure it out. But I would give this word of advice to guys that might be listening. The more you put in, it's always harder. This year especially. You can line up and tackle, you can line up and block, and you better focus on those things. You're going to win a lot of games. A team that doesn't fumble it, a team that blocks well, the scheme stuff is great, but the more you put in with a limited amount of time, the more overwhelming it's going to be to the kids. And so that's, as a staff, what we're meeting on is not what to put in, it's what to take out. All right, we can take this out, we can take this out, we can take this out. And so I think that's what's going to help us be successful, I hope, this season.
All right, on this next slide, you kind of already talked to the idea of simplifying or taking stuff out. On this next one, the question is, you know, how are you planning for when we get out of this? So you already mentioned the football side, what you guys are doing. So let's just say like physical, because I think we're all really nervous that kids are going to show up not what they would normally look like in August.
They are. Yeah,
so,
they are. Yeah.
Right.
I would say, man, I'm sorry, I would say that, you know, for us, fortunately for me, I've got a strength guy. So he and I are meeting a lot on that stuff. And so You got to get them in shape, because I really believe that the first 2 or 3 games every year are won by the team that's most in shape anyway. And so we're going to, obviously that'll be spread out a little bit, or will be kind of condensed. So you're going to, all right, now I've got maybe 2 months or maybe a month. So we're working on alternate plans. All right, if we get them in June, what's that look like? If we get them in July, what's that? What it has done, though, I think for us on that end and the football end, is it's made us really prioritize. You know, what's the most important thing, and then work down from there. So for us, you got to get them where they're not going to get hurt. And so we got to get them back in shape as far as cardiovascular. You got to get them back in shape as far as flexibility. You know, you don't want them. The big concern, I think, for most coaches, or at least on my end and for me, is will the injuries go up? You know, if we just dump them out there and just go full bore, these kids are going to get hurt. And so you got to kind of figure out a way to get them back in there. What does that look like? You know, you take them out there in condition first day, or you take them out there and just do full bore sprints, you're going to pop hamstrings and you're going to tear all kinds of stuff. So how is that going to look? And so for us, that's made us, we're going to have to be a little less physical up front. We're going to have to do less running than we thought we would normally do when we get them back, to get them back into shape. Can't neglect it, but in my opinion, if you go too quickly with that, you're going to get kids hurt. It's going to be counterproductive. Get them out there and sprint and do all this stuff. You got to get them built to where they can handle that. And like you mentioned, any coach right now that thinks they're going to get their kids back and they're going to be in great shape as a team, I hate to break it to you, but that's not the truth. You know, so you need to get them back and plan like it's square one, and you're building from there.
Yeah, all good points. I think that injury prevention model is going to be huge. You know, there's a bunch of stuff out right now from when the NFL had a shortened preseason, and, you know, how they, through the first 5 games, had like quadrupled the number of Achilles injuries and stuff like that. So, yeah, that will certainly be a huge focus. All right, so on this next slide here, just as a reminder, we're doing the free book giveaway. Make sure you mention us on Twitter. Coach Simpson, thank you so much for your time. You got any closing thoughts?
Man, I tell you what, I appreciate what you guys do. You know, I think if you guys aren't already getting on the Titan app, I mean, it's a pretty cool leadership app. It's got a lot of really good articles. You know, it's something that I think a lot of coaches right now are struggling for what to give your kids. And these guys are coming up with it for you. So I'd highly recommend using it. And they're already putting the stuff together that will help you grow in that realm. I really appreciate the time to talk with you today.
All right. Thanks again, Coach.